So Fox News is at it again, bashing Ilhan Omar, this time for allegedly spending $6,000 of campaign funds on a divorce attorney and personal travel. The article itself is of little interest to me. What is of interest is the almost constant use of remarks that she previously made about Israel as a way to insist that she is untrustworthy and therefore must be guilty of these crimes and ergo should not be trusted as a representative of the American people. Here it says, in the middle of the story, Rep. Ilhan Omar's anti-Semitic tropes prompt Jewish New York Dem to apologize to constituents. So that's linked in the middle of this article with no pretext, and it continues throughout the article. What do you think about this one, Mike?
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that ever since, it mentions that ever since her basically her first day on the job, she's been facing criticism. And it all stems from this Twitter comment that she made years ago that has nothing to do with these allegations of illegal activity and campaign funds. I don't think we can deny that, there is this controversy, but what is it, how it's relevant and what it has anything to do with this, I don't understand. Go ahead.
The problem is, I think, that she's well-spoken, intelligent, and she makes good points that make old white dudes look really stupid. And she's saying things that are progressive and in touch with the younger generations and what they want. And she's a real threat. She's a credible, real threat to, I suppose, hegemony would be the correct word. And the method that they have chosen to attempt to assassinate her character is to conflate criticism of the state of Israel with the idea of anti-Semitism. And this is a trend. There are laws being passed all over the place, anti-dissent laws, that mandate that you not criticize Israel or AIPAC or lose access to anything that's connected to government funds, which, as we know, is de facto making dissent illegal, or it's the state punishing people for speaking against a foreign power, which is wrong on the face of it.
Well, and as far as I understand, it's legally wrong too. I mean, they did this before with communists, and years later, those laws were struck down as being unconstitutional. Now, instead of communist, it's, in this case, Israel. They've just become more specific, and it's just really deeply disturbing. And I would even say, if we're going to call something evil, that these anti-dissent laws are one thing I would hold up in that debate of what is evil. Because it's completely antithetical to the First Amendment in every way. I mean, it's literally the state censoring opinions for political gain or for political purpose. That's like the purpose of the First Amendment, is to protect people to have the power to speak out against their government.
Well, and for example, there was a newspaper that was being bullied by one of these laws because they did not want to sign an agreement to never criticize Israel, even though they don't regularly criticize Israel. But if they refused to sign this agreement, it meant that they would not be able to get funding in the form of universities purchasing ad space in their newspaper. So effectively, that's the government coming in and saying, you can't print anything that is, anti-Israel, or we will attack your ability to be a newspaper. So another thing that I want to bring up is Fox News loves a good basic fucking story. And so they set up the villain, and then they have to have a good guy with a gun. So in this case, it is Representative Steve Drazkowski? Drazkowski? Let's just call him Draz. So Representative Steve Draz points out that, in his words, Representative Omar hasn't followed the law. She's repeatedly trampled on the laws of the state in a variety of areas and gotten by with it. I mean, the phrase has gotten away with it, right?
Yeah.
So, not that that's, I mean, that's not relevant. That's really nitpicky, but it's still weird. Is that true? Like, is that a relevant quote? Like, is that an honest quote for Fox to have put in here? Is that good journalism? Because I would say no.
And in this case, they do before this mention she had to repay some amount of campaign funds for, a previous speech engagement at higher institutions of education, as the article puts it. And those repayments stemmed from a complaint that he made. And it still hasn't been ruled in that case either, whether or not she actually committed any sort of illegal activity.
Yeah, she's innocent until something is proven. And this one guy, Draz, saying that he doesn't, like her because she, in his mind, flagrantly ignores state laws, even though like he doesn't qualify that. To my knowledge, there's no qualification of that statement. Like she's being accused of effectively breaking one or two laws, but does that represent a pattern where he can legitimately say that she has she's repeatedly trampled on the laws of the state in a variety of areas? That's a pretty broad statement. In my opinion, it just doesn't really have a place in an article where you're purporting to be a journalist. Or is this an opinion piece?
It's presented as a news piece.
Yeah, it's presented as just a news story, not an op-ed.
And I want to point out this Drazkowski, Mr. Draz here, is a Republican. And it's obvious just from these two statements, this isn't the first accusation he's leveled against her. So, I mean, is this the time where I get to say it's a witch hunt now? Like, because, I mean, isn't he just specifically targeting her out? And like, is he forcing this scrutiny on her because he doesn't like her, because she's a woman, because she's Islamic, because she's Democratic? Like, or did he just happen to have access to the knowledge of like, oh, her campaign finances were mismanaged?
Well, here's the deal. So I want to make a couple things super clear. I think Palestinians deserve human rights. I think what the state of Israel is doing to them is wrong. I think that it is fair to say that the power that the Israeli lobby wields in America is disproportionate to what it should be, even if we were to say that allowing foreign moneyed interests into our lobbying system is good. If we were going to concede that, which I'm not, if we were going to concede that, it would still, apex power would still be way over the top. And criticizing that, or saying that Palestinians deserve human rights, or saying that the Israeli state is doing things that are wrong, that does not constitute anti-Semitism. What does constitute bigotry is the constant hyper fixation on her being a woman and speaking truth. The comments underneath this article on Fox News are abhorrent. So I'm not going to read any of them, but let's just say that like it's no myth that when you construct a piece of propaganda like this, that it has the effect of bringing out racists and bigots. And the other thing I want to make clear, she should not be misusing funds from her campaign. And if she did that, like, it's a crime, and I'm sure there's a punishment for that. But it sounds like we're going to get a ruling or something on that in the near future. But as it stands now, aren't these pretty minor crimes? I mean, we're talking about, sub $10,000 total. And
Yeah,
if you compare that, if you compare that to what the average like take is for these guys on Capitol Hill, these old white fucks and all their corruption, the problem here is Ilhan Omar is going to have to be perfect, because they're gonna, any drop of blood, they're gonna fucking smell it. If she fucks up even a little bit, because she's actually good, she constitutes a real threat to the status quo. And it would be a shame to see her fuck all of that up on some dumbass bullshit like stealing a couple $1,000s from a campaign fund. I hope that that's not the case.
Yeah, and as far as I know, at least in my locality, local laws may vary, 2,500 isn't enough for basically almost any court. You would have to take that to small claims, and that's the first amount she was accused of. The 6,000, the second amount, I mean, that's maybe just beyond the small claims court. Like, this is ridiculously small time fish, and they're snapping it at the lowest hanging fruit that they can because it's easy, not because it's important. Not because, like, at the end of the day, like, yeah, it's wrong if you misappropriated those funds. If it's wrong if you funded private matters with your campaign funds. But we're also saying, and I think I would say this, you would say this, it's wrong to accept money from the NRA, pretend that you didn't, and then present yourself as an upstanding citizen who's for the Second Amendment, as though you don't have monetary ties to an organization that you're a member of, as Mr. Drauskowski is. He's a member of the NRA, and I bet you anything he took money from them in his campaign.
Yeah, I can't confirm that he took any money from them, but in general, I agree with what you just said. This is the game. This is what's going to happen. So hopefully, Omar's campaign was squeaky clean, but it's going to have to be like she's going to have to play a strange fucking game because the old white dudes are thirsty for that blood.
And they hate others.
Oh, yeah.
There's tons of old white dudes in the Senate and the House and the White House in general that they were around saying things like, no, we shouldn't segregate, or we should segregate schools. No, you shouldn't be allowed to have these two groups of people on the same bus. There were people in our government saying that, and these are the same people who she poses now.
Yeah, it's the same dudes. They're still alive, and they're still just being bigoted pieces of shit.